Welcome back. In lesson 5, I talked about making the design of your slides simple and clear. I focused on fonts and colours and so on. In this lesson and the next one, I'll focus on making the language of your slides simple and clear. This will be a kind of grammar lesson in which we try to make short, memorable phrases rather than long sentences. So, let's get to it. Let's look at these 3 original messages that could go on a slide presentation. Our sales figures have gone down by 30%, the biggest loss we've ever experienced, and we should analyse the reasons for the decrease in sales. And you have to remember it's very difficult to listen to the presenter and read such long sentences at the same time. So if we can, we should shorten them. How can we do this? Firstly, we just need to check a little bit of grammar, noun phrases and verb phrases. These are very important because they usually have most of the information in a sentence. Firstly, nouns. There are many kinds of nouns, specific things like cars and tables, and more vague or abstract things such as education or knowledge. We have 3 examples here: sales figures, 30%, and biggest loss. This last one has an adjective, biggest, and the noun loss, and together they make up a noun phrase. Verbs are sometimes described as showing some action, which is clear to see, like run or talk. But they too can be less clear, such as to think or to know. Our 3 examples are have gone down, should analyse, and have ever experienced. You can see the main verb is at the end, and then there are extra parts like should and have, which add more grammatical meaning, and they make up the verb phrase. So let's move on to our example slides. Here we have 3 examples of language for our slide. Number 1, our sales figures have gone down by 30%. Number 2, the biggest loss we have ever experienced. And number 3, we should analyse the reasons for the decrease in sales. In the first sentence, sales figures and 30% are noun phrases, they're in pink, and have gone down is the verb phrase in green. In the second sentence, biggest loss is a noun phrase, and have ever experienced is a verb phrase. In sentence 3, should analyse is a verb phrase in green, and reasons and decrease in sales are noun phrases. Now, these 3 sentences are all a little long, so let's try to shorten them. In order to shorten these sentences, one first step is just to keep the main noun and verb phrases, and we can remove the extra information. So in the first sentence, sales figures, 30% and have gone down are the most important pieces of information. We can remove our and by. In the second sentence, we can keep biggest loss and ever experienced. And in sentence 3, we can keep should analyse, reasons and decrease in sales, and we can remove the rest. Now let's see what we have. Number 1, sales figures gone down 30%. Number 2, biggest loss ever experienced. And number 3, analyse, reasons, decrease in sales. Well, we can try to shorten them even more, and we have to focus on the words which are very, very important to convey our message. In number 1, the word sales is important because it's the main topic, and we need down to show the situation, and we need 30% to say how much. In number 2, biggest loss is important, but the rest can be guessed. And then in number 3, we want to find out the reasons why the sales went down. So the word reasons is necessary to keep. Now let's see what we have now. Sales down 30%, biggest loss, reasons. This is a much shorter set of messages than the one we started with. You can see that almost all the words are pink, that is, they are noun phrases, and actually this is usually the most common kind of short phrase. Going back to our lesson 5 on design, we can play with the font, the size and the colour, and maybe have an effect. So let's see what we have now. Sales 30%, biggest loss, a great big red arrow, and reasons. And this is a much shorter set of messages than the one we started with, and your audience will be able to understand your point better by reading simple and clear messages on the slide. I changed the colour to red because 30% sales down and biggest loss are in the red, which is a common phrase that people associate with the colour red. The most important message in this slide is probably 30%, so I'll make the number bigger. And another important message is to think about the reasons why there was such a huge loss. So I'll make the word reasons bigger as well. Let's compare with our first original slide. You might think that having long sentences looks professional and informative, but that is not always the case. Easy to understand slides are clearly designed in terms of font and colour and images, and as we saw in our lesson 5. Another design feature is to make the language on your slide as short as possible. And you can do this by focusing on nouns and verbs, as nouns and verbs usually have the most amount of information in the sentence. In the slide that we focused on in this lesson, we ended up with mainly nouns. In the next lesson, we'll have a look at a verbs only example.